He was racing Lia at practice one day because we would just have shared practices. One day they're racing in something and I was not part of this practice. I was doing something else on the opposite side of the pool. And Lia beats this guy on the men's team. And our coach says, "You suck right now. You just let a girl beat you." And this guy yells to our coach, "That's not a girl." And it was so loud that every single person in the pool just stopped what they were doing and heard the conversation. He's my friend on the men's team. I told him that this is my favorite story from the entire season because it showed, yes, that is so insane. And the fact that my coach was trying to use that to try to like rile him up a little bit, but it's like, that is not a girl.
My name is Derek Wolfe. I'm a Super Bowl champion and a 10-year NFL vet. Now, after a decade of professional football, I'm focusing on my other passions. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Wolfe Untamed. Today's guest is Paula Scanlan. Paula was a swimmer at the University of Penn. She was Lia Thomas, or Will Thomas, however you want to look at it, one of his teammates. Her stories are incredible and she's doing a lot of really good work right now, and I hope you enjoy this one and I hope it opens your eyes to what's really going on out there.
Really, what I want to do is I'm going to start with your childhood, where you grew up. You don't have to like get into crazy detail if you don't want to, but just kind of get into how you got into swimming and what led you to the University of Penn, and then we'll get on to the juicy stuff.
Okay. So I started swimming normal swim lessons, age between 2 and 4. I didn't necessarily love it, but I was definitely better at it than some of the other kids. But I grew up in Connecticut. I have 2 parents and a brother. My brother and I are actually pretty far apart in age. We're almost 8 years apart, which is a pretty big gap considering there's no one in between us. So it was a really interesting dynamic where he had already graduated from college before I finished my first year of high school, for perspective. So he, in a lot of ways, was almost a third parent, more than a sibling. And interestingly, so that had happened, and he went off to college when I was in middle school, or I was in 6th grade, I think, the year he went to college. And the year he went off to college, he actually went to University of Pennsylvania, was not an athlete. He was never an athletic person. And the year he went off to college, I was still doing swimming. Our YMCA had opened up a big Olympic-sized pool when I was 8 years old, and my parents put me in the swim team, but I never took it seriously. I did it a couple times a week. I didn't like it. I hated being cold. Pools suck when you're a tiny little sneaky kid. And my brother went off to college, and something in me just lit up. And that first month my brother was in college, I took swimming so seriously. I didn't miss a single practice. I went from swimming being the slowest person in the last lane to, by the end of that year, I moved up into the senior age group, and I was practicing with kids that were 2 or 3 years older than me. And it was really weird because I had this weird perspective that my brother went off to college and I needed to have something that was my own, something that he didn't do. And so that's really when I started to take swimming really seriously. That year I was top 3 in the state in my events. I went on to, again, continue to compete top level in our state of Connecticut. And it was really, as middle school ended coming up, that I realized I could actually swim in college. And that was something my parents didn't even know was possible. My mom is an immigrant from Taiwan, and academics is something she takes very, very seriously. And she always thought that sports were just a hobby that you have, that you put on your resume. She didn't know what athletic recruiting was. She didn't know what playing a sport at college even meant. And other parents in the team were like, telling them, Paula is actually really good. She can actually get into college and swim. She can actually use this to get into college. And that was something my parents had never realized. And so eventually that led me to still swimming through high school. We went on, we ended up winning our state championship in high school. I still actually have a record in 400 yard freestyle in our high school league. It's the longest standing record in our league. Still up to this date. I haven't heard of anyone breaking it. I'd be excited to hear who breaks it because we had a really, really great group. It was a really lucky situation where the 4 of us girls who were on that relay happened to be in high school on the same team at the same time. So I would love to see it get broken one day, but it's still standing.
How many girls went to college?
All of us. So there was on the relay, we had myself, I went and swam at Penn. We girls swam at Duke, a girl who swam at Harvard, and a girl who swam at Yale. And each of us were in a different grade too. It was the coolest thing ever because it was a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, and a senior. So quite literally that 4 of us, we were never going to be part of that team in any other year than the one that we did that. And the most interesting part about it actually is every single girl on that relay actually either knew Will Thomas, who ended up being part of the story later on, or had to compete against him. Because the girl who went to Duke actually swam her first year at Penn, and she transferred before I got there. So that was very interesting. And she actually knew him, and then the other two girls were in the Ivy League the season that this all happened.
This is going to be a really good conversation because I get like an inside perspective. Like, this is awesome to me because I've always wondered what it was like to be on that team and what that was like and how that made you feel, how that made your parents feel. I mean, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But first I want to talk about, so what made you decide on Penn?
So my parents are obviously my mom, again, it's go to a good school or you're nothing. And this is not to defend my mom. Hopefully she'll watch this and love it because she loves watching interview with people. But it's true, and it's a cultural thing. It really is. It's if you don't go to a top school, it's just frowned upon. It's just an Asian culture. My mom's siblings went to Ivy League or Ivy League equivalent. Both my mom's siblings were engineers. My mom was not an engineer, and so that was even weird for her. And I really wanted to go to a school where I could swim D1 because there were D3 options. I mean, I was looking at some of these more academic schools that were close to where I grew up, right? New England has a lot of these D3 small schools, and I looked at a lot of those programs, but I really wanted to be part of a D1 program. And so the perfect middle ground was really the Ivy League schools.
Yeah. A Division I thing. Was that like was I want to compete against the best, or was it like what was that? What was your thought process on that? Because that's big on the resume. That you were a Division I athlete.
Yeah, I think I hate to say this because I'm not a type of person who just like looks at what you have on paper, but in a way, it just being able to say that. So let's say you meet somebody on the street and it's like, oh, I swam Division I in college. I don't even have to say where I went. That's a sentence that has more respect than saying, hey, I swam D3 in college. And that's not to shade anyone who's done that because it's hard, no matter where you compete, what sport you compete in. But I think part of me at 17 years old when I was making this decision, I wanted to be able to say that. I don't know. Maybe that makes me a little bit petty.
No, I don't think so. Because also the girls, if you're competing at a high level in high school, if you're competing for state championships and breaking records and stuff, you're around other girls who are being recruited heavily recruited. So it's like that competition factor kicks in. That's where you're like, you know what? If they could do it, I can do it.
And then there were girls that were older than me that swam on my high school team. And again, we had this, we won our league 2 years in a row, my junior year, my senior year. And it was just, our program was really, when we ended up winning, we were really unstoppable. I mean, everybody knew that we were the team to beat. And it was this great group of girls. It was how many top tier D1 swimmers you have at a random school in Connecticut? It's so unlikely. And so it was really part of something special. And they continued to win even after I graduated. Apparently now they've like finally fallen off a little bit, which is sad to hear that there's just not as many people coming through the works at our high school that are going to D1 schools and all of that. So, but we just, having swam through that, it's just like, it was just such a great thing to be part of. And that's exactly why all of this led me to talk about this, because it's so important to have these pipelines for these young girls.
The fact that we're willing to sacrifice the opportunity of women to advance and get Division I scholarships and to compete for national championships and to compete for scholarships. All of the negatives that come along with that, just so one dude can feel like, so one dude can be competing against girls. Like that makes me crazy. I think it's really unfair. I'm a girl dad too. I have 2 daughters. My oldest is getting ready to go to UT, University of Texas. She just got accepted to the business school. And
Awesome.
Then my youngest is an athlete. She like loves sports. I have to like force her to care about her schoolwork, because she just wants to play sports.
That's what my parents were trying to deal with.
Well, it's fun. The competitiveness and like the camaraderie and all that stuff. Like she loves that, and it scares me that, she might lose opportunity because, especially in this state of Colorado, where they're going to protect transgenders competing in women's sports. And that's like a politically correct way to say it. It's just dudes that want to win so they compete against girls because they were subpar at competing against other dudes. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about when you get to UPenn.
Yeah.
All right. So finally you get there. How was that decision? No. Was it what other schools were you looking at?
Yeah, so I was looking at some of the other Ivy schools. And so I think my biggest decision of choosing Penn was my brother went there and
Hold on a second. You're looking at what was your GPA?
so my high school didn't do GPAs, but I took 12 AP classes in high school. I was an AP scholar with distinction. I think that's the term. I think they've gotten rid of that actually because there's no merit in this country anymore, right? So they've gotten rid of that. It's offensive to have these rankings or anything. No one has a GPA anymore. They've changed it all. I did have to take a standardized test to get in, obviously, but other kids have had to do that in the past couple of years. They got rid of that completely. Colleges are just
So how do they just?
I don't know. They just accept you. I think apparently they're phasing it back in.
It is. They did because I know my oldest had to take ACT. She got I think she got a 31 or a 32 on ACT.
Yeah.
And she was like upset about it, and I was like, listen, I got this 19, all right. I tried hard to get that 19. So and well, that's like shit. So she takes advanced placement classes as well, and the way that they do the GPA is it kind of like it's basically like you get an A, it's like getting an A plus plus.
Yeah, they weight them.
There's kids with 4.8 GPAs or 4 point. I'm like, what is that? I was like, you mean 2.8?
That sounds more accurate. They weight the classes. I don't know how they even look at these things, but yeah, my high school didn't give us formal GPAs, but again, we had AP classes.
So you never got a B?
No, I definitely did. There was definitely a class or two that I think I might have gotten a B. I think when I took AP Chem, I definitely don't think I got an A in that class. Which I don't know. My mom was convinced that she wanted to have a kid that was a doctor, and my brother wasn't a doctor. So I was the only victim left. And so she was like, you should take all these like AP Chem. She made me take all these bio classes. And I was like, I just don't want to be a doctor.
Yeah, that's my wife did that. Abby did that too. She her mom was pushing her into the medical field, and she did all the, especially when she got to school. She ended up majoring in biology, but. So you were looking at
I was
like
looking-
Duke and Harvard and all that.
Not Duke. Duke's program is a little bit too fast for me. I was looking at Yale and Dartmouth, and that was the ones I like. In Columbia, and I don't really. New York City's kind of. I mean, I'm from the area, so it's less, fun. But I was looking at those. But I think ultimately I wanted to choose Penn because my brother went there, and it was a very interesting relationship where constantly being compared to him. So I really wanted to go there on my terms, right? So he got into this really hard to get into dual degree program between the Wharton School of Business and the College of Arts and Sciences, where he studied chemistry. And so he had that, and I said, oh, how can I be different but still do something similar that's not going to say, well, Paula went to a worse school? And I think in my mind, there's always going to be a comparison drawn. So unless you went to the exact same college, my mom could never say, well, he went to a better school than you. And I think that's really what motivated me. And then I also thought to myself, okay, well, how can I be different? And neither my parents nor my brother studied engineering. And I was like, engineering school sounds different. I'm going to have a different degree. It's going to have a different name. I'm going to have a different experience. And I said, let's just do it. And I was taking all of these computer science classes in high school anyway. There was a really small group of us that were taking, because computer science wasn't that big. I mean, now it's really blown up in this thing. Everyone wants to be a software engineer. But back then it was something they were piloting. Like they had just started classes in my high school. So I was already doing that. So I was already on that pipeline of one of the few kids that I took AP computer science. I was the first class they ever offered it for. So it was the very first round of people at my high school that took the AP computer science exam. So I had already had that set up, and I said, why not just go and study that? And it was hard. My grades are not very good comparatively to where I was in high school because engineering classes are curved to a C. I think I had some classes I definitely got a solid C on, and I was happy about that. But the weirdest part about it, though, is engineers are not also athletes. And so I remember looking around the engineering school in my grade in college, and there were 12 total people in my grade that were on a sports team, any sports team, and also in the engineering school. And the only girl was me. All the rest of them were boys.
Would they all play different sports, or was?
Yeah, it was a mix. There was a guy on the wrestling team. There was another swimmer who was in my grade. There was a few other random people. I think there was one guy on the football team who was like, whatever. There was a guy on the sprint football team too. There was like one of each. I think there was a guy on like tennis and one guy on the golf team, something like that. And I remember at graduation, you get the student athlete sash that you wear. And I remember looking around the crowd of people at the engineering school only graduation. And this is obviously flash forward to when I'm graduating college now. But I was the only girl that had the athlete sash. And I remember being like, let me go fact check this. So I went through every roster of every female sports team at our school just to see if anyone was involved in the engineering school. And I didn't find anyone other than myself. So it was a very uncommon path, especially also on swimming, which is a sport that's very, very time consuming. You have morning practices and afternoon. I had so many classes that I took zeros on because they couldn't accommodate for it because they'd never had an athlete in the class before and they didn't know we had sport competitions, so we had to miss class for. And so they would say, tough luck.
Well, yeah, because you go there, you get in because you're an athlete, right?
Yep.
You're an athlete, you're a good student, so that's where you go. And then they're not going to make it so that you can do, like, they make it impossible for you to do both.
They did. I got a 0 on an exam. And I remember I was doing the calculations. The highest possible grade I could get in the class was like a C+.
And you passed the class still?
Yeah, but barely because I got a 0 on the exam. So things like that would happen. And I think that was my earliest sign, though, that these universities are not there to help you. They're not there for you to be successful. They're there to just follow their own rules
and take your money
and do what they want. And that became much more clear when they put a man on my team, which hadn't happened yet at this point. That was my freshman year. I started to just see some of these, this is going to be pretty challenging.
Hey guys, I want to talk to you about one of my favorite sponsors, Juniper Mountain Coffee. Coffee without compromise. You're getting high quality coffee without the high prices. This is an American company that stands behind their values. They stand behind their coffee. These guys make some of the best coffee I've ever had. It's a coffee I drink every morning. Juniper Mountain Coffee works directly with the farmers, paying fair wages, and that way you have no middleman. There's no BS, no garbage. You're getting high quality products. So go check them out at junipermountaincoffee.com.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the fun stuff. So did you swim on the varsity team as a freshman or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So swimming it's not like there's some sports where people are, sitting on the bench and are redshirting. Swimming for the most part, if you're on the roster, you can get in, you can compete. Even if you're a freshman, you're going in and usually going to competitions. So freshman year was just standard dealing with failing some exams because I had to miss school and just a normal college experience. It was when I showed up for my sophomore year that everything started to change. And that's when we found out that Amanda's going to be joining our team.
Okay, now let's talk about how that happened.
So we go back to school. So the way that swimming, first to paint a picture, the swimming season starts on October 1st. That is our official day. You practice before then. And you start practicing the minute you step on campus, but it's captain's practices. It's not mandatory, but everyone goes. And so the first week of classes is the beginning of September or the last week of August, sort of around that timeline. And we're doing our captain's practices. Everything is normal. And I remember this so clearly. It was a Friday, the first Friday of September. And our coach tells all of us, and it's the same coach for the men's team and the women's team, so this is important. And he says, okay, we have to have a mandatory team meeting. And every time you have a team meeting, it's the men and the women together, because if there's an announcement that we need to know, it's the same coach. We always are together. He told us the men are going to have a meeting first, and then the women will go. And I remember thinking that was so bizarre because, again, there was nothing the men's team ever needed to know that we didn't also need to know. We had the same schedule. We swim at the same meets. All the meets are co-ed for the most part. I think there's one or two that's not. And I said, okay, so we wait for the men. They walk out of the team room. They finish the meeting. They don't say a word to us. I'm like, okay. I walk into the team room and I was one of the first people there. So I'm towards the front. So can't see how many of my teammates are even behind me at this point. And my coach is standing there. And a member of the men's team is standing right next to him. And this men's team member was by the name of Wolfe Thomas. And he was the grade above me. So at this point, he was a junior. I was a sophomore. And I said, why is he still standing here? And I was like, okay, well, surely he'll leave. And then our coach will start the meeting. So everyone gets there and our coach is like, okay, Will is still standing there. And he goes, Will, this is your meeting. Looks to him and says, Will, this is your meeting. And I thought to myself, what could a member of the men's team possibly have to tell the entire women's team in a meeting? And he looks at us and in under 30 seconds, just looks at the entire room and says, hey guys, I just wanted to let you guys all know that I'm transgender. I will be transitioning to your team next season. Please refer to me now with she, her pronouns. Oh, and also, I haven't announced what my name change is going to be yet. So please call me Will, but refer to me she, her.
That's it?
And at this point...
Hold on a minute. That's all he said?
That's all he said. And at this point, I'm choking back laughter because I'm 19 years old. What am I supposed to think? I'm covering my mouth and I realize I can't see anyone else's reaction. So I turn around, my entire team clapping. Congratulations. We're so proud of you. Thank you for coming out to us. Thank you for being your authentic self. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, does nobody else think this is crazy? And so for the brief moment in time, and people laugh when I say this, but I'm so serious. My coach was always a joking guy. He would always make jokes. He was always making fun of people. He was a lighthearted guy, our coach. I thought that he was going to pull out a camera crew and say this was an episode of Pranked or something, or Candy Camp, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And I thought that it was going to be a social experiment. And we were just seeing how everyone would react. But that never happened.
So what's the next practice? He's just practicing with you?
So this is when it starts to get weird. So notice in what I had said is he had told us, I'm going to be transitioning to your team next season. So at this point in time, it's the beginning of the season. So everyone had a million questions. Our coach just said, we'll all talk about it. Don't worry about it. Start practice, get in the pool. I don't think I even paid attention to a single thing that happened that practice. My mind was spinning. The second practice ended, I went back to my locker. And I went onto the NCAA website and I said, why is this allowed? What is going on? And I found this thing called the Transgender Inclusion Handbook. And in the handbook, it simply says 1 year of testosterone suppressant and you can be on any women's team in any sport. D1, D2, D3, any sport. And so I said, okay, so surely he must have started the protocol at some point within the last couple of months and he needs to wait some period of time before he's allowed to compete with us. And so eventually, everyone's asking our coach questions. We ask questions about the locker room. We ask questions about how this is going to work. And so not just in this meeting, I think over time, over the next couple of weeks, we're told he's going to continue to compete with the men's team. He started the protocol in May. So he was already a couple months into this in the announcement in September. So by May 2020, he would have been eligible to compete on any women's team in the country. And we're told all of that. And the locker room situation is the most interesting because he's still undressing in the men's locker room. And so I will tell you this funny story because I just saw one of my friends from the men's team at Penn a couple weeks ago. And he was telling me his perspective because I asked him about it. And he said that it was the weirdest thing. He had the locker next to Will. And he said that one day he was putting on his suit and it just kept going because he was now wearing a woman's suit, but changing in the men's locker room. And that was the way my male teammate on the men's team described it. He said, yeah, normally we all putting the little Speedos the men wear. It's funny, but they wear those. And he said, in the suit just kept going and he was wearing a one piece. And so he was still undressing in the men's room, still going by the name Will, competing on the men's team, but wanted everyone to call him she, her pronouns. And then he started being invited slowly to women's team events. So we'd have team dinners every now and again, or team bonding activities, or team trips. And he would be invited to both the men's team ones and the women's team ones for that entire season. And he was competing in a women's suit, sometimes competing on the men's team, but he didn't go to every competition. They kind of it was just a transition year, as they say. Bizarre is the best way to explain it.
What was it like having him at your team events, like your bonding events? That stuff's important for team building. So were you the only one that thought this was insane?
So what's so interesting, I am the type of person, for better or for worse, I wear it on my face. Like if you say something weird, you'll know. Like people are always like, oh, I feel like Paula doesn't like me or whatever, because I'm too expressive. It's not that I don't even like people, I react to things. I'm very honest, and that good or bad. And so immediately I'm having conversations with everyone on the team, and girls one-on-one are telling me that they completely agree that this is completely messed up. They're like, yeah, this is so unfair. But then you go to the group and they're clapping and they're like, oh, I'm so proud of you. But behind the scenes, they're like, yeah, this doesn't really seem right.
They're afraid to get canceled.
And so the funny about the team bonding is right after this announcement, end of September, we do this team activity every single year. And you split up into small groups. It's roughly 2 girls per grade that are part of this. And you have a dinner and you answer questions about the team. And it's supposed to work on team culture and camaraderie. And then the next day, everyone comes together. Of course, in my breakout group, he's part of it. And so I can't even make this up. There was 8 of us part of this group. And one of them is this 6'4" tall, fully grown man named Will that I'm supposed to call she, her pronouns, who's still competing on the men's team and decided he was a woman 2.5 weeks before. And I was 9. I remember this. And I said, of course he's in my group. And we had to just have this conversation and pretend whatever. And I remember I lived with one of the captains on our team, and she pulled me aside after this thing because she wasn't part of the group I was in. And she said, how was it was everything okay? Is everyone including Will? And I was like, yeah, I guess. Like, I didn't even know what I was supposed to say. And again, it's also power dynamic because I'm an underclassman. This is a senior asking me this, who's a captain. And I was like, this is so bizarre. And so I was very obsessed with reading NCAA policy at this time. I would have one-on-one conversations with anyone who would listen. I remember I had friends that were on the swim team, that were on other sports teams, or just random students at the school. And this is all they would hear me talk about. I had friends on the track team that told me I was making it all up. They were like, "Yes, no way, you're just pulling your leg." I'm like, "No, I'm so serious." And I remember one of my friends in the track team, I told about this at the very beginning of 2019. We had I'm having a mixer with track a couple of years later. Will was competing on the women's team and actually on the women's team. And I pointed and I said, "Remember what I told you 2 years ago?" And he was like, "No way." And I was like, "Oh, it's real."
Yeah, that's really a dude. What's crazy to me is that I keep going back to when you said they just have to take testosterone replacement for a year. What about that 20 years before that, where he was going through puberty and building up bone density and muscle mass? And how do they justify that?
The whole thing, and again, this is NCAA policy at this time also was years old. I think it was almost 10 years old at this point. I think it was something 2012-ish is when the policy came out. So it was super dated at the time. And this handbook doesn't have any science in it. That is the one sentence that has scientific anything in it. The rest of the handbook is stories with men. I'm so serious. Men wearing skirts, growing their hair out, saying, "I am so happy that I'm now competing on a women's sports team. I must be included." That was the proof. Their proof was that these people are happier, so you have to accept it. And that was what the handbook said. And so I think part of me thought that someone was going to step in and do the right thing. I thought the NCAA was going to figure this out and say, let's change the policy. I thought our university was going to step in and say, no, the Ivy League would step in. I just, for some reason, part of me thought that someone was going to step in and do the right thing.
Right.
And I remember being like, do I need a lawyer? I remember telling my parents, and I remember I even called my dad, and my dad and I have a great relationship. He brought me to all my Soviet stick kid. Like, we could not be closer. And I remember I called him to tell him, he said, "Paula, I don't need a dramatic story from you today. Like, you're always exaggerating things. Like, I don't need that, right?" He thought I was just making something up, or I was being dramatic, or I was trying to prank him or whatever. And it then still ended up becoming a reality. And so what gets really interesting is Will was actually the grade above. And so the Ivy League cancels all sports, every single sport for the entire 2020 to 2021 season. Was COVID. And we're the only league in the country that made that decision, actually. So every other D1 school about to compete in some way, shape, or form, we had nothing. And I remember saying Thomas was supposed to graduate in 2021. So all of us, sigh of relief. He's graduating. We don't have to deal with this. It's not going to happen. And then he decided to take a gap year and not compete that season. And then he came back 1 year later in 2021 with my senior class, even though he was the grade above. So we had a moment where we did think we were actually never going to see the results of how this would look. And of course, that didn't happen. And 2 years after the original announcement, he's on the women's team. He has a locker like everyone else, even though they told us.
In the locker.
In the locker room. Even though they told us he would probably be changing the single stall family bathroom locker room in the hallway. He has a locker like everyone else. It's just, there's no announcement.
I try to imagine walking into my locker room in college and there being like a woman in there. I would have been like, whoa.
So I was a little bit forewarned. So I happened to be going into, and I got very, very lucky in this situation. I had gone into the coach's office to ask a question before the season started. This was, again, when everyone's still moving in. We're still moving the freshmen and all of those things. And I remember going in, I had a question for our assistant coach. We had a new assistant coach we hadn't worked with before. And it was his first season. So I just was going in there to ask something. It was about gear or something silly, like just a normal question. And I go into the office. I see the locker chart on the desk of our assistant coach. And I look at him and I go, "Oh, is this the locker chart? Like, have you given me a locker yet? Because I don't care about where I am. I care about where the man is going to be." Because at this point, it was still unclear if he was going to be in the locker or not. And I looked down at the chart and I see that he has a locker. So at this moment, I knew that they had assigned him a locker, that he was going to be in our locker room. And I said, "Oh, have you given me a locker yet?" And he was like, "Yeah, I did. It's right here." And but that locker wasn't next to him, but it was close to him. And the best way to explain our locker room is it's shaped like an L. And I look at our coach and I say, it's my senior year. I really want to be on the opposite side of the locker because my locker is in that other section from the first 3 years. Do you think it could move me? And he was like, sure, no problem. But what I was really doing was moving myself as far away as I could be from William Thomas in our women's locker room. So I got super lucky that I happened to be there, like, again, as he was filling in these names and doing a locker chart. But then also mentally, I knew he was going to be in the locker room because I saw it. And I don't think many of my other teammates even knew until we were walking into it.
So when you walk into the locker room, he's there. What is?
Yep. He's just there. He's undressing like anyone else. He's acting like anyone else. He's walking around like anyone else. I am not looking. I'm trying my best to just keep my head down on it. I don't want anything to do with this. And I was like, this is ridiculous and insane. And I think the worst part about that entire experience, though, was that I would be at my locker, not talking to anyone, just changing, and I would hear a male voice. And I would get really concerned because I would think someone maybe got in there or there was someone coming, whatever, the wrong time. And then I would say, no, actually, that person is supposed to be in here. And my university invited him to be in the locker room. And so I would keep having to jump myself back to my reality, which is terrible having a man in there. And again, he didn't do anything to really not make his presence known. He was talking to people in the locker room. He was just acting like anyone else. And we were told, we can get into all the meetings and things that happened, but the message was very clear to all of us that if we had a problem with it, it was on us. And one of my really close friends in the team, she had the locker next to him. And she changed in that single stall family bathroom that he was supposed to be in every single day for practice. She would go to her locker, take her suit, and tiptoe into the hallway and come back. And I would look at her and we would just be like, we couldn't do anything about it. And she went to her coach. My coach was like, tough luck. Like, he's going to be on the team whether you like it or not.
Your coach ever like says, I'm sorry that this is the way it is.
Yeah.
I can't do anything about it. Did he, or because as you're talking about it, I'm starting to think about, like, I'm a coach of a team. Is this guy, is this coach encouraging this because he knows that he can get a national champion out of it?
No, and that's definitely not was never my coach's intentions. I think there's a lot of people that have tried to paint that narrative. I don't think it was. I think in private conversations, I mean, of course, when you're meeting with the team, you say good politically correct thing, but in one-on-one meetings, it was kind of just like, I'm going to lose my job. He didn't say that exact line, but it was, I'm going to lose my job and they'll probably put in someone that will allow this. Because a lot of it wasn't coming from even the swimming world. It was the university really wanting this. I heard, I don't know how true this is, but I heard that the president of Penn, who's this woman who's like very high up and willing with the Bidens, like Biden appointing her for some, I think, like ambassador to Germany or something. Also, Biden was a professor, a loose term, at Penn. They paid him $1 million to come in and teach a single lecture. So it's all very tied to a lot of these crazy Democrat policies, and not to get like overly political, but it's very tied together. And, the president of the university loved this. They would continue to encourage it. They would post photos of Thomas's accomplishments. And I think that the one thing that shows how supportive the university was this more than anything else is the fact that they nominated Lia Thomas for NCAA Woman of the Year. Each school gets a handful of nominees at most, and they chose a man competing on a women's team to nominate versus any other female athlete, not even in the swimming world, but any other team, the sports team of the school.
It's all optics for them, and it's all
it was, and they were
virtue signaling. It's just like, oh, I'm more woke than you. It's just, that's what it is.
And the Instagram was decked out with him, and I received messages actually later on from alums that were asked for donations. Like Penn would say, please donate money, and they would message back and say, why do you have a man on the team? And they would send back this message that said, we support Lia Thomas as an alum of this university and as her career as a female athlete. They would like give that response to people who were upset about it and didn't want to donate anymore. So they really doubled down on it.
Well, they're still getting I bet they were getting federal funding.
Well, now the Department of Education is actually investigating Penn. So that's now we, have a favorable one. And so that was something they dropped really right after the whole executive order and on all of that.
All right, guys, I want to talk to you about a product that I've been using for a long time, over a decade. When I was playing football, one of my main staples in my diet was bison. I got my bison from Great Range Premium Bison. They make some of the finest cuts of bison you can get. These guys have ribeyes, ground bison, all the steaks that you want. My favorite part about Great Range is that you don't have to worry about antibiotics or growth hormones in their meats. Great Range Premium Bison is a family-owned company providing bison meat from family-owned ranches around the country. So please go check out greatrangebison.com.
What was it like when he got in the pool? Was he just smoking everybody? Was it just like,
Yeah.
because to me, if you're just getting blown out by this guy, it's like, why am I even competing?
It was really discouraging. I think in practices I had wanted, I just wanted to stay as far away from him as possible. I think I would always wait for him to pick the lane that he was in, and I would be as far away as I could. I think also we run different practices. That's something, there's a lot of different events in swimming. I swam different events than he did. So I was very fortunate to not have to directly compete with him most days. I was doing different practices. I was swimming different events. And so that too was very lucky, but I would see what was going on the side of the pool he was in. And this is my favorite story from something that happened during the season. Same male teammate that I saw that was telling me the story about the suit kept on going. He was racing Lia at practice one day because we would just have shared practices. We'd sometimes have men come to the women's practices. We'd have practices where everyone would be together because again we had the same coach.
Yeah.
And so one day they're racing in something, and I was not part of this practice. I was doing something else on the opposite side of the pool, and Lia beats this guy on the men's team, and our coach says, "You suck right now. You just let a girl beat you." And this guy yells, "F you," to our coach. "That's not a girl." And it was so loud that every single person in the pool just stopped what they were doing and heard the conversation. And I told he's my friend on the men's team. I told him that this is my favorite story from the entire season.
Yeah.
Because it showed, yes, that is so insane. And the fact that my coach was trying to use that to try to like rile him up a little bit, but it's like, that is not a girl. You just had another member of the men's team. And previously they had trained together as members of the men's team together. They had been male teammates for years before. And so magically now he's a member of the women's team. And I think in that moment, what was most telling to me was how my coach reacted, that it wasn't like, "Oh my gosh, how dare you misgender this athlete." It wasn't like that. It was kind of a laughter that he acknowledged the ridiculousness of the situation. And that was a moment I really knew in his heart that he also knew that it was wrong.
I think that had you had a men's coach and a women's coach, separate coaches, and your coach happened to be a female, I think you would have had somebody that would have stuck up for you as a coach, because
Yeah, I don't know. I can't speak to how it would have gone. I would have hoped.
I think that things would have happened a little different, or even more fight there, because I think that this guy was put in a really bad situation and an unfair situation, to where what's he supposed to do? You're telling him that this is the only option, and his girls are going to have to compete against the guy now. And so when you guys start competing in like actual competitions, and he's just winning everything, was the praise just unbelievable for him?
So I can talk about our first. So also the other thing is we lost you for COVID. Okay. So there were a lot of people on this team that did not touch water for a year. I'm not exaggerating. There were people who just said, "I don't have mandatory practices anymore. I'm not going to swim at all." I had teammates come back that had either gained freakish amounts of weights or lost freakish amount of weight from having not trained. It was a season where nobody knew how fast anybody was going to swim, even myself included. I had no idea where I was going to be because practices were just so all over the place. And so the biggest question in my mind was really, how fast is he actually going to swim? I mean, he's taken a year off from swimming at this point. He also is taking these experimental hormones. I didn't know how bad it was going to actually be. And so I think a lot of us were really holding our breath. We go to our first dual meet. We swim against Columbia University and at Columbia. And we'd never beaten Columbia in a dual meet head to head. In the 2 other previous years, we competed against them. We ended up winning the meet, to surprise to no one. But my most memorable part was at in a relay, the freestyle relay that they were doing. I wasn't part of it, so I was watching on the side. We were so far behind Columbia, but Lia Thomas jumps in, demolishes the girl who's anchoring from Columbia. Like, jumps in like 5 seconds behind her, and I think beats her by 5 seconds. Like, it was a wild. And I had this moment where I felt so torn. I said, if I had seen something like that happen and it was one of my female teammates, which of course is possible. Sometimes there are girls who are very talented. I would have been ecstatic. It would have been the coolest thing ever. We won the whole meet because it's the last event of the meet. And then I had this moment where I said, this feels disgusting. This feels dirty. And I'm looking at the faces of these girls in the Columbia team. And I feel guilt. I feel ashamed. But also I'm supposed to be happy that we just won. I'm supposed to be happy for the other girls in the relay that just, put a really good time on the relay. So I'm like torn between these two emotions. And I live near the New York City area. I grew up in Connecticut. Also, my family's originally from New York. My parents are there. My brother's there. And I remember like looking up the stands at them, and they were like they didn't even know what to say. And I remember even after the meet, they were talking. I didn't even have anything to say about my own events. I don't even remember what I swam. I mean, I know what events I swam, but I don't know how well I did because that's all I could think about. And that was the moment also in my mind where I said to myself, this is going to be a bad season. And of course, the worst possible outcome happened. He won an NCAA championship, which again was still going to be a possibility to not happen. I mean, of course, wasn't really surprising that it did.
Hey everybody, this episode is brought to you by Black Buffalo. Black Buffalo's nicotine pouches do not contain tobacco leaf or stem. What they do contain is a ton of flavor, and they're packed with pharmaceutical grade nicotine. The magic of Black Buffalo is they discovered a way to make cured edible green leaves behave like the texture of tobacco. And they add food grade ingredients for industry classic flavors. You're in good company if you roam with the Black Buffalo herd. The business was built by dippers with decades of smokeless tobacco use. They manufacture their tobacco alternatives with respect for those products that came before them. Bold flavors, full pouches, metal lids, and a brand that stands for something, American. Their products are also proudly endorsed by brand ambassadors such as MMA Hall of Famer, Cowboy Cerrone, NASCAR champion, Brian Blaney, rising country star, Larry Fleet, and Rob O'Neill, former U.S. Navy SEAL Team 6. So if you're 21 and older and you consume nicotine or tobacco and you want to join the Black Buffalo herd, head over to blackbuffalo.com to learn more. You can order nicotine pouches online and they ship directly to most states. Or you can check out their store locator to purchase pouches at thousands of retail locations around the country. Black Buffalo, an American brand, pouches worth respect.
There was a lot of bullying going on when it came to girls wanting to speak up about this. Can you talk about?
So I think part of it was there's shock because we'd had so much time off from swimming that everyone was just grateful to be back. So the conversations about being uncomfortable or whatever were very limited because again, it was just, oh my gosh, none of us have swam. Also, we're going back to in-person classes. I hadn't seen the inside of a lecture hall in a year and a half at this point. Plus, so it's a lot of that emotions of just, I'm just so grateful that they're letting us come back and we're masked up at practice. There's masks in the side of the pool. I'm getting waterboarded daily by this mask that I'm supposed to wear in the pool.
So you're swimming with the mask on?
The athletic department's rule in Ivy League was you had to be masked to practice. That was the rule. So my friends on any land sport team, they were wearing masks during practice. In the weight room, we had to wear masks. But you can't wear a mask while you're actively swimming. And so they came to us and they said, swimming is the one sport that's getting an exemption. You guys are so lucky. I was like, what are you getting an exemption? It's not possible to swim if you have a mask on. But that was what they did. So the rules that the mask had to be on the side of the pool. You have to immediately put it on as soon as you got out of the pool. All of that is happening, right?
That doesn't make any sense at all. And it just so the fact that they're like, oh, you guys are so lucky you don't have to put a mask on. What?
But they're on the side of the pool and the mask is wet. And also everyone's mask looks the same. So you probably take somebody else's accidentally. That's even worse. What if you just don't have one?
Yeah, it's disgusting.
So keep in mind that we're dealing with all of that. And we're masked in classes. You go to your lecture hall, you have to wear a mask. That is all happening at the same time.
That's so much.
Mandatory testing. Athletes have to be tested twice a week for COVID. And if you, for some reason, test positive for COVID, you're put on a quarantine situation. You're not allowed to practice. You're kicked out of meets. I got contact trace to somebody, so I had to take 2 meets off I wasn't allowed to go to, even though I was testing negative because someone had said I was with somebody who tested positive for COVID. So there was all of that going on simultaneously. And then this is all happening. And so it didn't really start. He started competing. It was just, no one picked up the story. But eventually, as the season goes on.
So this hadn't hit any mainstream.
No, and I was tracking. I swear I had University of Pennsylvania's Twin news alerts set up because I was dying for someone to get a hold of. Someone needs to talk about this. And I didn't know who to go to. I didn't have any resources. I didn't know what any of this looked like.
What were your parents telling you to do?
My parents, honestly, at this time, were telling me, they're like, Paula, just just swim. It's your last year. Like, you're going back to school. Like, I was, it was my senior year. I was a head TA, so I was running a engineering class that I had to grade all the kids' homework for. They're like, just try to, and
Get through it.
get through it. And I don't think they even realized really still what was happening. And then they had heard me talk about it, but it was just so wild.
Because everybody was also distracted with COVID.
Yeah, that was the bigger one too. Is like we were stressed about testing because we had to go do these tests. And again, if you test positive, you have to sit out a couple weeks of practice, which is a big deal in the middle of the season. So people are constantly stressed. Or people who were drinking hydrogen peroxide before the COVID tests. People were doing wild things trying to make sure they tested negative. I mean, it was like a fear-mongering state. And so this is all going on. Eventually, I finally find an article online that mentions the fact that Lia Thomas is actually William Thomas that competed on the men's team for 3 years. And it was at a website I'd never heard of before called Outkick.com, which I'm sure many people are probably very familiar with at the time. And the author of the article was this writer named Joe Kinsey. I found his Twitter and I DM'd him on Twitter and I said, "Hi, my name is Paula. I'm on the Penn swim team. The situation is far worse than you know. This whole thing is insane. I would love to give you more information if you're willing to talk to me about it." Basically, like, been dying for someone to talk about this. Like, please help me, essentially. And I think I was on the phone with him that night. Or if not the next morning. He immediately got back to me. We had probably an hour phone call where I just told him everything that was going on, all the weirdness of him being in our locker room, the fact that he was still a fully intact male, the competition, all the different things. And so I had told him I was really scared. So he offered to write the article and to say, I interviewed someone who swims in the Ivy League. And I went back to him and I said, that's not like, so powerful. So why don't we just say anonymous UPenn swimmer? And this article ended up really blowing up. I'm sure so many people probably saw it. And the worst part is that a lot of my teammates figured out that it was me because I had made a mistake of telling one or two people I thought I could trust. And they were screenshotting messages I sent to them and sent them to the whole team. And so I got kind of canceled internally. Yeah, it was not pleasant. A member of the men's team texted me something. We're girls who sent really mean messages, but a member of the men's team sent me something crazy.
He's a coward.
I was like, well, it's not your problem. But what's so weird about the timeline of that happening is I did the phone call with him, and it took him a couple days to write up the story. And in between talking to him on the phone and the article dropping is when the athletic department decided to come in and meet with us and do damage control. Because at this point, once Joe wrote the article, there were a few other news outlets that had figured out the fact that he had competed in the men's team. It was actually a man. And so this is a notorious meeting that everyone talks about. They brought in this panel of administrators. It was people from the athletic department. It was people from psychological services. It was, college campuses, they have too many administrators and don't have anything else to do for work other than come bully college kids. And so I think there was 12 to 15 people there at this meeting. And it's led by this athletic director or junior, it's not the athletic director, but it's one of the assistants to the AD. And she leads the meeting. And first off, also, men's team, not part of the meeting. And Lia Thomas is told to stay home. Yes, they told him to stay home. They literally told him to stay home. So it was just the women's team, and it was mandatory. They sent us this email, mandatory team meeting. And so they started the meeting off by saying, we understand there's a lot going on right now, but Lia being on the team is a non-negotiable. So doesn't matter how you feel about it, this is going to be a reality. We are here to make you okay with that. And so they started going on this whole thing. They compared, they rambled on and on and on. This is the new civil rights movement. If you don't want to undress with him in the locker room, it's equivalent to not wanting to address with people based on their race in the 1960s.
Come on.
To which I say I'm mixed race, so we'll cut myself in half and use two different locker rooms. That's what I was going to ask them. And so it was that. It said, you'll never be able to find a job. So he said, if you ever speak out about this publicly, they'll look you up online. You'll be painted as a transphobe. And they said, do not talk to the media under any circumstances. The media is not your friend. If we see anything, you will regret doing that. And so it was just a lot of that. And then the final thing.
This is after the article came out?
This is after I had done the phoning.
But it hadn't come out yet.
And the article drops the next morning. That's why this is like the timeline of everything is so crazy. So So anyway, we sit there this whole meeting and I'm feeling like hot. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. And the last thing they tell us is they say, if you still object to everything, and again, it's like you're racist, you're hateful, you're transphobic, you're never gonna get a job. Don't talk to them, Divya. That's the gist. The last thing they say is, here's the number for psychological services, please make an appointment. So he said that we needed psychological counseling if we objected, which is even more ironic because if anyone knows anything about the University of Pennsylvania mental health services, in 2019, the director of the psychological health services committed suicide because his job was too stressful. And it takes 2 to 3 weeks to get an appointment with them. And it's notoriously bad for students who are struggling. So it's not even a good resource, even if you were to go seek that help. So it was just completely insane that was like their highest recommendation for what we should do. And so this meeting ends. I'm getting a little bit panicked knowing that this article is in the works.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure they just fear-mongered the shit out of you. But did something inside you tell you, like, this is bullshit? Or were you like...
I was first like, well, we need justice. And I was like, oh, but no one will know. And so I think part of it was like, oh, this article will come out, but like, no one will figure out that it's me. Or I can just, not talk about it, or just, I don't know. It was just like, it hadn't come out yet. So I didn't even know really when it was dropping. I wasn't sure if I had another week or another 3 seconds, so it wasn't really like an active concern. And I go home, I turn on Fox News, and I have these screenshots on my phone. It's so funny to look back at these. Clay Travis, the founder of Outkick, is on Fox News, and he is talking about the fact that they had found someone on the team that they'd interviewed and they were going to drop the story. And I remember taking a photo of this, of Clay Travis who is actually a good friend of mine now, and I've gotten to know him, which is so fun the way things have worked out. But I screenshot this and I post this and I go, oh my gosh, Clay is teasing my comments. And I post this on a private Snapchat story that I thought didn't have anyone from the Penn swim team on it, but it did. And then everyone screenshotted it and sent it around so that the next day when the article drops, everyone immediately knew that it was me. And so that's how I got sort of caught and canceled, and everyone immediately knew that I was the one who had said something.
I'm just confused as to why they wouldn't have your back on that.
Because it's feared. So the worst part about it is that I could have private one-on-one conversations with everyone, and almost everyone. There were a few girls who really did die on the hill that this was fine and unacceptable. But there were people who were afraid to say what they actually believed. And even people who have come to me a couple years later, I've had people on the team I didn't talk to. One of my teammates came to me a couple years after, right? And has talked to me and been like, I'm so sorry for everything that I did during that season. Like, I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Few and far between. I think only 2 of my teammates had really ever reached out to me at all post any of this happening. But there are a few people that have gone back and reflected and said, yeah, actually, like, I should have been more supportive of this. And so the part that gets so interesting is this article, whatever, and people are texting me and they're saying, I know it was you. And I go, show me the proof. Because I was like, I'm not admitting it. And they sent me back my Snapchat story. And I was like, oh, so I'm really caught. And I go, also, why are you sending around my own, like, what, why? Like, what, you're talking about me behind my back? And so that was really interesting. The worst part about it is that this is during finals. So I'm taking exams. And I remember I had a final exam, actually, as this was all happening, is the night of the article being dropped. And it was a laptop exam. It was an open laptop exam. And my messages were coming through my laptop while I'm taking this final. And it's like, you're disgusting. I don't want to ever see your face again and on the team. And I'm taking an exam. And I was feeling like physically unwell, like feeling sick. And I actually had this moment where I want to just go up to the professor and be like, I can't do this. Like, I can't take this exam. I can't finish. Like, what am I supposed to do? But I always had no choice. Take it, score horribly on the exam, of course. It was hard anyway. It was in a computer like design class. And I go home that night and I literally have an 103-degree fever. And I'm physically ill for 2 more days after that. And so that to me was it was just so shocking, and like the reaction from these people that I thought had my back. And then the worst is I'm texting with my assistant coach and she's like, I'm sick. I can't practice, all this stuff. She's like, you have to come to the pool. Even if you can't swim, you have to come. So just a couple of days later now, I show up for practice. It's a Saturday now. And instead of practicing, we're just having team meetings. And we go to this room to have the meeting, and it's by grade level. So Leah's not part of this at all. And so the captains who are in my grade meet with the freshmen, the sophomores, the juniors, and then our grade. And we go into this meeting, and the girls in my grade just go around the room and basically tell me that they think I'm disgusting and awful and the worst person. I'm in tears, and they just keep going. And one of the captains who I talked to previously about feeling so unhappy about all this, she agreed with my opinion, and then in the room goes, well, I don't understand why you would do this and be anonymous in the article if you're willing to admit that you've done it to all of us. And I go, it's about fixing this problem. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. And the girls go, that's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to support our teammate. And our teammate is Lia Thomas. It's funny to look back at now.
At the time, though, that's traumatic. That's a traumatic experience to have to go through.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's so wild. And I think, I don't even know why we didn't have to spend time and energy. And the fact that even happened, that there were these situations where people, again, every girl in that room, for the most part, agreed that this was wrong. Like, I don't think there was actually, in my grade, there were some in other grades. I don't think there was anyone in that room that didn't acknowledge that it was unfair in some way, shape, or form, whether it was the locker room or the competition or whatever. They all have that stance. And what's so funny to me is that one of the girls who was our captain that season, not the one who had just been really yelling at me, one of the ones who was just there quietly, I'll see her viewing my Instagram stories every couple of weeks. So it's like, you're keeping tabs to what I'm up to. You said nothing to me about it. Not a thing. And I know for a fact that you had such a problem with this because you were in tears during the season having to deal with competing against him, dealing with him being on our team. But you just still to this day, you don't want to say anything about it because you're just afraid and you just want to put your head down and not ruffle the waves.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of it is because people you become the people you surround yourself with. So if you're around a bunch of people who are like, I call them sheep.
Yeah.
They're just a bunch of sheep who are like, oh, this is human rights and all this other bullshit. You're more willing to just, turn a blind eye to what's really actually happening. And I think that's really the case is what it is that if you can like just separate people from that and then they can see it from like a different view and see how wrong it actually is, they'll change their mind on it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. I think that it's people that are like, they know it's wrong, but they're in a little group and they don't want to get kicked out of their group.
Yeah.
Right? They don't want to be kicked out of their friend group because that's what humans want, human connection.
But I think for me, though, that having happened and all these girls immediately not wanting, and people went to our coach and so they refused to room with me at meets too. I don't know how.
So they really
Yeah.
discriminated against you.
Yeah. And I was wanting to take pictures of my senior class. So I did photos. One of the girls in my grade said that she was like uncomfortable with my presence or something. What I'm saying on it, it's not to feel bad. I'm actually really grateful for the experience. And in fact, actually, after the executive order was signed, I actually thought about texting a girl who leaked my Snapchat story and say thank you. Because truly, I mean it. If they hadn't isolated me like that, I wouldn't have felt alone, like I was the only one. And I wouldn't have had the time to think about why it was so important to talk about this. And I wouldn't have been empowered to speak out because I would have been part of the group. And it would have been encouraging you not to. So in a way, that just allowed me to keep going and seeking more things and talking more about this and not having to worry about what they thought about me because I already knew they didn't like me. So that was, I mean, this is such a long story and I feel like there's so many details of this. And so, but it was years. And that's the part that a lot of people don't realize.
I can't believe that those girls didn't have your back. Those are your teammates. You're part of the team too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is like Lia Thomas is on the team, but I am too, but I'm
sorry I had to go through that because you shouldn't have to do this. You know what I'm saying? You should not be in this position. You should have been able to go and compete and go to school and have a normal college experience, but instead you have to deal with COVID. Then you had to deal with a dude wanting to compete against you. And then you had to deal with your teammates discriminating against you because you disagreed.
That's the worst part is I didn't disagree with them. They all, for the most part, shared my opinion.
But they wanted somebody to gang up on. So you caught the heat for that.
And the worst is, so that this actually, when we did So Yale, it was about a month after this team meeting I just explained. And so the media there was protests at the meet, there were supporters at the meet, there was media people, there were random like individuals from the public who just wanted to see this situation. It was chaos. And that was, I mean, the best way to put it.
I'm sure. Let's switch gears a little bit because I want to talk about kind of what's going on here in Colorado.
Yeah.
So East High School, they recently turned the only girls' bathroom on the second floor into an all-gender space while leaving the boys' bathroom unchanged. I would have to go in there and hurt somebody if I found out a little boy was in the locker room with my daughter or in the bathroom.
And that's what a lot of fathers say. It's always the women that have to accommodate, right? So if you wanted to have this open bathroom situation, maybe what if it was the men's room? Like, I don't know why that's never
Why is it the women's restroom?
Why is that never the first instinct? They always just have to get rid of it. I see this across the country. So I live in New York now. I'm from New York, Connecticut area, right? I was at dinner with family friend the other day. Their daughter, who is in elementary school, okay, very young girl, was talking about how a boy was peeing in the bathroom at their elementary school, and that the principal was very supportive of it, and all the parents had no idea what to do, and all the little girls are uncomfortable. And everyone was just like, you're a hateful, horrible person if you say anything about it. So this is happening across the country. And what's so interesting is now we have this executive order from Trump, and nobody of their states now, these blue states here in Colorado, where I'm from, Connecticut, New York, they don't care. They're just saying, we're just going to try. We're going to wait to get sued because it's going to take a while to hold this up in the court so they can, while they're waiting for that to happen and lose their federal funding or get sued or whatever, they have months to potentially try to keep breaking these rules to allow anyone to do whatever they want, to continue to violate the rights of not just the kids who are in these situations, but also the parents who don't even know that their kids are going through this because they don't tell the parents anything.
Well, why are they trying to die on this hill? Why is that the hill that they're going to die on? Fighting for someone's right to be who they want to be. All right. I am all for that. Okay. But I'm also all for keeping women's, like, women deserve to have their own league and their own game where they don't have to worry about a dude coming in there and taking away opportunity. That's what it is. You're taking opportunity from a woman. Yeah. Every time a dude steps onto those blocks to run or to swim or spike a volleyball in somebody's face and break their head, break their nose and, jaw and their eye sockets. And every time that happens, or a basketball game, every time that happens, a woman loses her opportunity. And multiple lose the opportunity because maybe that's going to convince women not to even compete. So you're not going to get the best of the best competing because they're like, why would I do that? Yeah. Why would I compete again if it's going to be dudes and I'm not going to be able to win anyways? Like, it's a rigged system at this point. So the fact that they're willing to die on that hill, I don't understand.
But it's weird because we're seeing now, especially this issue, is that there's a disconnect between the general public and the people and the representatives. And this is not just the representatives that are out in Washington, D.C., but even if there was a vote in Minnesota the other day on this issue, trying to protect women's sports, every single Democrat in Minnesota voted against protecting women's sports. But again, 67% of even Democrats, 80% of Americans, 67% of Democrats agree.
But they won't vote against it because they have to be a good Democrat.
Yeah, and we're now stepping into the situation where these people in D.C. or in their house, whatever, don't represent what the people want and like probably vote for in other elections.
Well, I say this all the time, that if you go left and right, whatever, right, Republican, Democrat, if you go across the board to, go pick out 100 of each, I bet that more than 90% of them are all in middle on most things. It's the fringe that is like, they're screaming, yelling at each other, and we get caught in the middle of it. And it's like, you have to pick a side here. Like, you have to pick a side. You know what I mean? It's like, they make it so black and white that you have to pick a side. And it's just not fair. And it's not reasonable to think that, like, okay, so you're telling me that to be a Democrat, I have to be okay with men competing against my daughters.
That's what they're saying. And that's probably what they tell them.
I have to be okay with a grown man going into the same bathroom as my 5-year-old dog.
Oh, and that actually happened even on my team. We were swimming at a training trip in Florida, and the 4 and 5-year-old girls age group was practicing after us. And so Lia Thomas, 6'4" tall man, is undressing in the locker room of these 4 and 5 girls. Do you think that their parents had any idea that we were there or knew that this was happening? It was awful. And I didn't even think about how different that is because I was 21 years old doing this. Yeah. Was it pleasant for me? It was 18 times per week that we had to do this. Not pleasant. Not fun. But I'm an adult and I understand and I can protect myself and I can go change in the bathroom stall. 4 and 5-year-old girls Are you kidding? And that is the worst part. And one of my teammates from the women's team who I saw the other day, she said that that's the one part that scars her the most of the story. And we are allowing this to happen across the country by saying that anyone can do anything that they want. And again, we've had this executive order, but now we're seeing Democrats or blue states say, I actually want to follow those rules.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening here. I mean, right now. So, for example, the Colorado Rapids. My daughter played on that soccer team in that league last year, and now they're saying that you can compete against the whatever you identify as is what you get to compete as. So the Democrats, one thing they do well is they play the long game.
Yep.
So they will just they'll have a 20-year plan, and that 20-year plan they'll just if they might win and lose some things, but their 20-year plan is there, and that's what I think this is a 20-year plan to make it okay. And that's why Trump winning was huge, right? But we have to win the next election too, because if they let a Democrat back in, they're just going to reverse all of it, and you're going to go right back to it, and it's going to be this flip flop, over and over again. And I don't know think about how damaging that will be for women's sports if they start letting little boys compete against girls in every.
Well, they'll split, and that's what I talk about. Was that experience at Penn unpleasant? Absolutely it was, but that's not why I did what I did, and that's not why I talk about it. I think about myself in high school. So when I talks about having that New England record, that's our state league, right? When I talk about that record, if I had been competing against boys the year before, maybe I wouldn't even have ever wanted to swim anymore. I would have said, you know what? This is not for me. I don't want to do this. Or I'd have been discouraged, or I could have been bumped off that relay and replaced by a boy. And I would not be able to say that I hold that record, right? That is a reality. And that is what I was thinking about when I said we have to fight against this, because it's not about even the college girls. For most part, most people's end of their athletic career ends in college. It's the last step. It's about how you got there. And now we're seeing elementary school girls, middle school girls, high school girls. Those are the impressionable ages. Those are when they need the sports the most. I know for me personally, swimming actually taught me to be a better student, so I had to learn time management. I actually think my grades went up because of swimming, because I had to learn all these skills. Without that opportunity, who say I would have even been able to swim in college or do anything else or even become the person that I am today with all the wonderful things swimming taught me? And that is why we need to fight this early, and to put young girls through that is just disgusting. And I still cannot believe that they're standing for this. Maybe so, it's just a few little school children and they just want to be happy. There's room for you on the men's team. Nobody is being banned. And that's the argument. No one is being banned.
Listen, as a masculine man, I don't want to lose to a dude that's dressed like a chick. All right. I don't want to lose to that. So I'm that's going to I'm just saying, man, if you are a dude and you think that you're a girl, you don't have to, if you want to compete in sports, you have to still compete against men. They are so narcissistic, and that's what I think it is. I think that somebody like Lia Thomas, I think that person is a narcissist.
There has to be. I mean, there's a normal person, and there's no point in time where he ever was like, are you guys comfortable? I'm sorry, I'm making you uncomfortable. There was never that acknowledgement. And I even during the season, I would try to be like, how does he feel? Right? Maybe he truly, believes he's born in the wrong body, trying to be sympathetic to that. I didn't see any of that coming from the other way. And a lot of these athletes who are doing this, I have never heard them once acknowledge the other side.
What do you think the NCAA is going to do?
They now say it's up to your birth certificate, and also they have no policies about bathrooms. They say that men can be on practice teams for women's sports. And I think the actual physical practicing part, that's a little bit different. I mean, in swimming, we would compete with the men, so that part I'm like, okay, whatever. But based on the current policy, there are 44 states in this country that allow you to change your birth certificate. So tomorrow, in my home state, if I want to go get my birth certificate changed and say that I'm actually male, I can do that. And there are 44 states in this country that allow you to do that. And that is what the NCAA wants to base their policy on.
They're allowing loopholes.
I'm of course I'm angry about it, and a lot of us are, and Riley Gaines, who I know we've talked to, a good friend of mine, we talk about this issue all the time. We're angry, but my answer to this is I'm not surprised, because they saw Lia Thomas dominate. He won an NCAA championship in the 500 freestyle. And that was not the event he's swam against Riley, and that was a different event. He won. The second place finisher, the third place finisher, and the fourth place finisher were Olympic medalists. They weren't just Olympians, they medaled at the Olympics. The NCAA saw that happen and didn't think that was enough to change their policy. Then they had many months after that they chose to not change their policy. They announced their policy change in February of 2025, 3 years later, and it's birth certificate. So for them to take this long to respond, of course it's going to be, loopholes and halfway done and just the bare minimum, because how dare you defend women?
So much can go wrong with that. But you're just the loophole there, and that has to be changed. What if you could write the rule right now?
I think honestly, we do physicals already, and I think you do physicals obviously in professional sports too, right? It's not like an outlandish thing to suggest. We had to go in for physicals, and Democrats, especially AOC, is suggesting that by saying we want to change the rules of these sports, we're going to be subjecting every single young girl in this country to be sexually assaulted from genital inspections. You can know your DNA from a cheek swab. And that's what they used to use back in the 60s when there was a whole issue, the doping, the Easterns and all this, all of that. We could go back to that. I mean, I actually remember in my freshman year of high school biology class, we got our DNA out of our cheeks, and you put it through this thing, and it's, this is a sample of your DNA. That is so easy to do. And they're suggesting like it's this invasive procedure.
It wasn't invasive to stick a swab up my nose, up into my brain. And
that's a really good point, actually. You know what? Yes, we had to COVID test with the nose twice a week at the University of Pennsylvania. We just need one cheek swab when you show up at 18 years old as a freshman. Tell me which one's more invasive.
Here's the thing. I feel like all these high schools and these youth leagues, they're going to follow the lead of the NCAA. So that's why there's a lot of responsibility there to make sure you make the right choice here. Like, you got to do the right thing. Because it's going to trickle down all the way down to the 5U soccer, and it's happening now. What are they, 6 years old, and they're got little boys out there? And to me, it's like, okay, at that age, it doesn't really matter that much. But if he gets to compete against girls all the way through high school, he's going to dominate them.
Yeah. Also, coaches would be incentivized to recruit these male athletes, right? So coaches are supposed to win. And so now it's also putting them in a sticky situation where they're going to value these male athletes over the female athletes, whether they want to or not, because it's literally their job to have the best team that they can.
So what are you doing? What does like your future look like? What are your future plans?
Yeah, so obviously we're still working on this issue. That's why I'm here in Colorado. My good friend Megan Burke, who is watching us right now, she has young daughters and takes this issue very seriously. And we're going to have to start attacking these states that are going to start, the sanctuary cities equivalent. We're going to have sanctuary states, so these blue states are going to find loopholes and continue to allow kids to be mutilated, and also have boys compete in girls' sports in all ages. And so we're going to keep raising awareness of this stuff. We're going to put pressure on them. I mean, obviously the NCAA hopefully will improve their policy. It took 3 years to get this crappy update that they have now, so I know it's going to be a longer fight. I think, unfortunately, so this past week, I don't know how looped in you are, but the Senate was voting on if they should, and not a single Democrat crossed over. So unfortunately, protecting women in sports is not going to be federal law. It passed the House. It didn't pass the Senate first round vote, and it needs to get 60 votes, unfortunately. I hope to see a day where they can do that, and I hope that they bring it in the next session. I don't know what that really looks like, or how the dynamics will change, or if people can be swayed. So putting pressure on those types of things. But in general, I'm continuing actually to work in the political world. So it's completely unrelated, but I am working in New Jersey on the governor's race with a group called Early Vote Action, if you're familiar with Scott Pressler. I worked for him. We're working on the New Jersey governor's race, which is not quite related to women's sports. But interestingly, I've worked with all these people on the ground in New Jersey. And you know what issue comes up, I think, is top 3 that people talk about their problems with the government in New Jersey, because it's very, I have a Democrat as owner, is the trans ideology in the schools, is the women's sports issue. So it's still a relevant issue to people in states with blue governors and blue, general assemblies, or, all of that. So it'll still all be related, and that's something I'm working on. And again, it's just about talking to people and trying to make them feel represented. It's not even about left versus right. It's really just about listening to the people. And I think that's what we're seeing happen on the Democrat side is, again, 67% of their voters do not agree with this, and they are not represented. And so it's really about trying to bridge that gap between the people that feel disconnected by their representatives.
Yeah. People have to get primary. That's kind of the move we're trying to make here in Colorado right now is, I'm going to work. A lot of people really would like to see me run here, but I don't think that it's a good idea. I think that I'm better fit at like giving support to somebody that is better fit for that, because I have a tendency to say things I shouldn't say. And, I think that politics would be great, but I think that what you're doing is that's how it starts. Start with your local government, and not just like even like your districts, right? Your congressmen, and making sure that you are getting the right people elected that stand on the same kind of belief. But you have to make sure they're not a rhino, because you have to make sure that these people are legitimate and that they're actually going to vote the way that they say they're going to vote. Because I think what happens in politics a lot is that these people start out in politics for the right reasons. There are a lot of people that do it for their own reasons because they're going to get rich, like the Pelosi's, and the Bidens and all these people, like they get in the Obamas, like they get wealthy and then try to tell us like how to live our life, while they're just like breaking in, tens of millions of USAID money.
And making movies
And how and writing books and getting paid millions of dollars. How does Joe Biden get $1 million to show up in?
I think it was 1 or 2 lectures that he showed up to at the university. And because I remember there was like, Joe Biden is now a professor. And I go, what class is he teaching? And it was, he showed up to guest lecture. I was in the political science department. I remember when that happened, I was like, there's no way. And then, a couple weeks later, our president gets, president of the university, right, gets called up to go be an ambassador to Germany.
It's dirty. Politics are dirty, but I think what happens is they get into politics and then they get a little
corrupted.
They get corrupted and they get because everybody get into the material side of it of, oh, well, if you do this, I'll do that. And then they have special interest groups and these big corporations, big pharma gets involved and they fund because these campaigns are expensive. You're on the right track. You're doing the right things. You're doing everything, and it's so honorable what you do. Because you didn't have to, you could have just shut your mouth and you could have just got through school and never said anything and never brought light to any of this. But you spoke up and you did the courageous thing. And I don't know, I think
I appreciate they think that, but the fact that we're calling people courageous for saying, hey, men and women are different and a man is a woman and a woman is you just is just such a lot. Like if you said this 10 years ago, people would have been like, what is going on in the year 2025?
Yeah, but it is honorable because you got to think, what kind of discrimination comes along with, and I can relate to it because I refused to kneel in 2016 for the national anthem. I wouldn't kneel, so I was discriminated against for that. Called a racist, called a bigot, oh, you hate your black teammates. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like that has nothing to do with this. And then when it came to the vaccine and the COVID. Then I was a murderer. I didn't care about my team and I didn't want to win and I didn't care about any of this and that. I'm like, because I don't want to get a shot, an experimental shot, I'm a terrible person. Like what? You're the terrible person for every day trying to convince me to get that. So I can relate on a little bit, but because I know what it feels like to walk in and your teammates look at you like you're not the person they thought you were. I know what that feels like.
I think the pro sports leagues still need to be reformed too. I think that's another area.
Thank you again for coming on and telling your story. And thank you for all the work that you're doing now. As a girl dad, I really appreciate it. And we need more strong women like you.
Yeah. Thank you for just giving a platform to this and also being so willing to say your opinions and just talk and listen. So I'm really grateful for you and I wish the best for your daughters.
All right. Thanks for listening to the Wolfe Untamed podcast. Be sure to check me out on Instagram, DerekWolf_95. Check out the Wolfe Untamed podcast on YouTube. You can listen on all the other platforms, as well as DerekWolf.com.